and welcome to the New Generation Challenge podcast. We are your hosts. My name is Brett Parnell,
I'm TT Fernandez.
and we're going to get back into it and get up to date on season 40 Battle of the Eras, starting with the challenge episode 3. So that would be, I guess now it aired about a week and a half ago, but getting back, do you have any initial thoughts, TT, on episode 3 before we get going into detail?
So we'll definitely get into the eliminations and everything, but I have a lot of thoughts on the eliminations. I won't say too much. I will say I was very happy that Avery won, and I feel like you cannot convince me that Tony was not just there for his appearance check.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Getting started, let's just, I guess, start from the beginning of the episode and we see everyone's reaction to watching essentially the cast get trimmed from 40 to 32 coming back into the house.
Yeah. I think that was definitely a major change, and I think it really made like the remaining cast members kind of understand that the game has started and everybody is like I guess in danger and nobody is safe, and that could be them next week.
Yeah, completely. I think it's going to be unique in both perspectives because you're absolutely right that it could be them. At the same point, too, we've also now seen one woman and one man eliminated from every era, and the
Hmm.
players there have that are still there, whether they got through an elimination or got through it by winning the daily or got through it politically,
Hmm.
have all really earned their spot in this game. Whereas 32 is about where a normal season would begin if it wasn't this season 40 that they wanted to bring out 40 names for.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, like you mentioned, everybody that is there is deserving of being there. And I really think that they did weed out a lot of the people that maybe I don't want to say weaklings, but maybe the people that aren't as prepared are as the people that are there right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So moving in, we have our first daily where we have these team representatives and targets that we're looking at. So that's new because we had the qualifier effectively before. So we're gonna go into the daily with um representative.
TJ, yeah,
So
TJ asking for team captains, I guess you
exactly,
could call it.
yeah. So that's exactly the word I was looking for. So for era one, we get Jody and Durell. Era
Hmm.
two, we get Derek and Aviv. Era three, we get Tony and Avery. And era four, we get Casey and Kyland.
Yeah, it just kind of brought me back to All Stars ever since TJ said we need team captains. I knew right away that if your team loses, you are going into elimination. So
Yeah.
if that was me up there, I would not be volunteering no matter
No.
what. I think that they should have brought it up to almost a vote and see who, I mean, unless people wanted to volunteer, but I would not volunteer unless I got basically forced to be the team captain.
No, I wouldn't want to either. Though, as we see, it seems like this is continuing on throughout the season, at least to this
Hmm.
point. So, at probably multiple points during the season, everybody is going to have to be in that position, provided
Yeah,
that they're still in the game.
yeah, and I think later on in this maybe later on in this episode or the next one, but well, I think some eras were kind of in the mindset of I'll volunteer now, but it's going to be somebody else next week, and just make sure everybody gets around into that position.
Yeah, which is really interesting because that would is easy to do at the beginning. Once these teams start getting smaller, at some
Hmm.
point somebody is going to be stuck in that like Big T and Melissa position from last season,
Hmm.
where
Absolutely.
players just don't want to go in and therefore continue to force the same person to either win or go home, regardless of whether it's fair or not.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right, especially on eras like era 3, where you have people like Devin and Jordan who, and even Corey, not as much as those two, but they're very protected in their era and they have the numbers. So I feel like it could definitely get to a point where it's gonna be the same person every time being nominated for possible elimination.
Yeah,
But also with that comes if your era wins, you also have the opportunity to vote people in, which I think is an interesting position because obviously it's good to be in the winner circle and make the decisions, but it's also like you're making a lot of enemies by whoever you're voting in, and you better hope they don't come back.
exactly. It's interesting that you say that just specifically about Era 3, because that's one thing I almost noticed from the beginning. I don't think we've talked about it, but Era 3, as much as all of these teams have legends of the game, Era 3 just seems to have all the biggest personalities all
Hmm.
together that is going to make for some interesting deliberations as we go through this game,
Yeah, and I think
especially if they're not winning.
a lot of the Era 3 cast members were mainstays, I guess. Like you have Jordan, you have Devin, you have Tori, you have Leroy, which he retired but came back, but he was still there for a lot of the 30th seasons. And those are all people that are very well connected and or I guess Leroy and Amanda aren't there anymore, but you get what I was saying. They're very well connected and they're very like some of them are part of the Vacation Alliance, so they're very set on protecting each other.
Yeah.
And they're not, like you said, their personalities are really going to come out when it push comes to shove.
All right, so ready to get into the daily?
Yes.
So this was a very interesting. My apologies. I'm still getting over asthmatic issues.
Oh, you're
Um,
fine.
this is a was a very interesting challenge entitled Gladiator, where first of all, it they really go from m multiple different skill sets once
Hmm.
again, as we see. So first, they have to work as a team between rowing a Vietnamese dragon boat all the way around the
Hmm.
island, and we see some teams do this far better than others. I'm looking at you, Era One. That was just a disaster on their part. The other, I think Era 3, if I remember, was first, but Era 4 wasn't too far behind.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, it was just an absolute disaster for Era One. They really shit the bed.
Yeah,
And we see like Brad coming in saying he knows how to work the rudder, but clearly he did not. We see Jody break her rower. We see just a hot mess, honestly. And I feel like a lot of them are in very good shape still. Like you still have Rachel, you still have Derek, you still have a lot of people that are like if it was individuals, they could probably beat a lot of the other eras, but I feel like
yeah.
all of them together is just a shit show.
You're right. And I also feel there too, it's like maybe if people in Era 1 have at this point pretty much spent their entire adult life just focused on the challenge.
Hmm.
So you almost run into a issue where the so at least from what I get a sense of, I think this Era 1 cast is so like gym focused and running and lifting weights that something like rowing a boat they just haven't practiced,
Yeah,
and it doesn't
yeah.
seem to be part of their training repertoire. When you notice, like you said about Brad saying that he knew the rudder, well, when he says that, he's not even holding the rudder, he's paddling.
Yeah, and I would definitely have to agree with that because I feel like a lot of people that train and come back season to season, or like we know, like Jody trained a lot, or whoever, they're mostly focusing on training like weights and like trying to bulk up. But in reality, I feel like a lot of the more important skills that you can have are just simple things like being a good swimmer, knowing how to
Yeah.
paddle, knowing how to do puzzles. And I feel like that gets overlooked because we often see like when it comes to the champions, it's not always the biggest, like, and most muscular person. It can also be somebody like different that just has a lot more skills. And I think Devin is a great example of this because obviously he does have like he is somebody who is a physical threat, but he's not going to be as physical as a CT
Yeah.
or an Horacio or a Theo. but we saw him become a champion because he knows how to do these weird skills and he knows how to adapt and learn through his skill set. So I think that's a very good point.
Exactly. Um, that's the other thing too that I was just thinking of now while you were speaking that really I think makes a lot of sense with that is there's been a shift that a lot of people I haven't really seen talk much about in the online community, but that in Era 4 seasons, you don't see them repeating the same elimination over and over and over in a season. And I think that's where maybe some of these Era 1 and Era 2 players are not broadening their skill set is because they were so used to coming from seasons that would see a Hall Brawl 5 times out of 15 episodes.
Yeah, and it also surprises me that they didn't, a lot of them didn't, you can tell that they did not watch older seasons
Yeah,
because obviously I understand not everybody wants to watch every single season if they haven't been on in 20 years, but it's also like if you know you're coming on 40, I would definitely be watching at least the last 3 seasons and
yeah,
doing
for
some
sure.
homework to try to see who's going to be showing up and like who's good at what, if that makes sense.
Exactly. All right, so moving on from that aspect of the challenge, next, after that, and the players get to shore, we have our first eating challenge of the season, which I found to be quite interesting because I guess it ended up being balanced in the end. I didn't quite realize that all the eras had to eat the vegan item as well.
Hmm.
At first, I thought that that was just something that was being given to Tori, and I think there's one other vegan contestant that I noticed
I
online.
think Nehemiah, yeah.
Nehemiah, yeah, that's right. But no, now that kind of eased, I guess, any fears of it being unbalanced because we realized that there was just 8 items and only one of them vegan contestants could
I
eat,
think
but
it
that's
I think it was two. I think it was
or two,
because correct, which era is Nehemiah on?
two.
I okay, because I feel like he has not been getting a lot of screen time and I couldn't
No, he
tell if he was
hasn't.
in era one or era two or era three.
Which pretty much tells us that either he's going to be gone in a week or two or he's going to have some sort of breakout episode.
Yeah, or he just didn't make a big yeah, anyways. But I'm pretty sure that there was some type of dry tofu
Yeah,
and the drink, and I don't remember what the fruit was called, but
durian
apparently,
fruit.
yeah, durian. Apparently, that's the grossest fruit that there is
I
in the
mean,
world.
from my travel experience, when I went to Bangkok, there's literally signs when you walk into the subway in Bangkok that's just like no smoking, no alcohol, no marijuana, no durian fruit. It smells that bad, but the locals love it.
That's crazy. But anyways, I'm pretty sure there was the two vegan options. And another thing that I found interesting that it wasn't necessarily because I feel like they didn't show that much of the eating. I think that in other seasons we get to see more. And I think I saw on social media somewhere that like you didn't necessarily have to eat like all of your own dish. Like I think Banana said that he ate one of the eyeballs and then the rat. And
Oh, really?
like
Interesting.
I think it was just kind of getting it all over with. And I'm sure everybody had to at least eat something.
Right.
But we had the coconut worms, the rat and the snake. Um, what else? The durian, the tofu, the brain,
Yeah.
some eyeballs. Yeah, I was like sitting back and thinking to myself, like, what would I choose to eat? Because I don't think that there was one good option.
No. There's definitely wasn't, but if there was, it wouldn't be much of an eating challenge either. So,
That's true. But because I feel like, what would you eat if you had the choice from all those foods?
um, that is a great question. I don't know. What about you?
See, that's what I was thinking about. I was thinking back, like, what would I eat? Definitely not the brains, because I feel like the texture of a brain.
That's
I'm a
I
big
heard
texture person.
I heard that the texture is horrible from people who were on Survivor the Australian Outback, probably the first show that had a brain eating challenge. I
Yeah,
was thinking the going back. making another survivor eating challenge reference here. Now that you say what one would I eat, the larvae that grows into trees, it looks like on Survivor that you can just swallow that whole and get it over within a matter of seconds.
See, I think
So I
what I
think that
would
would
have
be my
ate,
pick.
I think I would have had I think the coconut worm or yeah, the
Mm,
lar and I think I would have killed it and
yeah,
swallowed it like a pill. But you would have to make sure you really kill it first.
yeah,
Because I feel like that one is the one that you like can taste the least and swallow it, throw up, get it over with.
exactly.
But definitely not the rat or the
Because I
snake.
no, because I know like going back to the first season of Survivor, Jovis ate that's those same coconut worms in about a
hmm
second and a half.
Yeah. So I think that would probably be the best option.
I would agree.
Obviously, nothing good there. But then we see Tony do a really good job at eating. Um, who else did a pretty good job at eating? Corey can eat pretty good. Um, I don't
It
know.
it was a bit hard to say because they didn't actually show us what time frame it actually took.
And I feel like they didn't show like a lot of footage on the eating part of it. And I
Yeah,
think that's probably because a lot of people complain about how disgusting it is to watch. But I don't know. I feel like it's hard to judge who did very good because we saw so little. But then after that, we saw them do the putting all the seasons in order. What did you think about that?
I thought that was interesting. Um, I also thought that a good thing about this is that it was almost relatively fair. I mean, there might be some people who have been really around the community in era one that had an advantage. Like I'm thinking of like Mark for how many challenge events he does with some of the younger kids.
Mm-hmm.
But it was like you noticed most of like era one was just as unlikely to know what season was Spies, Lies, and Allies versus
Mm-hmm.
era four was just as unlikely to know whether Gauntlet or the Duel came first, which I couldn't even tell you.
Yeah. Yeah, I think see if I feel like if I was going on a challenge season, I feel like that's something you gotta memorize
Yeah,
because especially on a season like 40, I'd bet the house on the fact that that's going to be one of the challenges. But I understand that obviously not everybody does that. And we see Kylan the calculator, he didn't remember everything. So he definitely, I think, helped Era 4. I think it was Era 3 who ended up winning the challenge because Tony and Avery won.
yeah.
And we didn't really touch on that, but
I
we
think
did
it's a
see.
big advantage just looking into the future of the game with how, despite only coming in the Challenge USA, which is very recent,
Mhm.
Kyland is giving me the impression that he's probably been a fan all the way since Era One,
Yeah, and if
which
he
I know
hasn't,
a lot
I
of
feel
the
like
newer players have not been and have only found out about the show as players from those shows start getting on.
yeah, and I think that a lot of the era four players, they like or I mean, I feel like Kyland is even if he wasn't a fan way back when, he definitely has gone back and watched all of the seasons that
Yeah,
he can, or at least a large majority of them. And if he hasn't done that, I'm sure he's at least watched all the eliminations, all the dailies, and just tried like you can tell he really, really came prepared. And I think that's something that I really admire because you know that he's there because he loves the game and he wants to do well in the game in comparison to somebody who's only there for an appearance check. So,
exactly. Yeah, I really liked that with him and with some other people that they did bring on in the Challenge USA. But how
hmm
even though there wasn't many who were experts in the game, you do see a few who really know it and are taking that opportunity. Even like I know in the Challenge USA one, and this is a little sidetracked from this episode,
hmm
but like despite how much she was getting attacked for her behavior on the show,
hmm
people were like, "Oh, this is all older people. Why is Sarah getting so into it?" And it was because Sarah was the only real challenge fan on the season. So
Yeah.
she just was like, "This is the challenge that I grew up watching when I was in university. So of course I'm gonna embrace being on the challenge." Whereas people like Tyson and Ben just didn't get it.
Yeah, and like again, not to get super sidetracked, but I know Sarah got a lot of hate after that season and world championships or whatever, but I just going back to it, like she was somebody who really loved the game and appreciated it, and I feel like that's someone that I do want to see on the show. I want to see somebody
Exactly.
who, I'm not saying they have to be a super fan or anything, but just somebody who wants to be there and they obviously appreciate the game. So definitely think that Kyland is one of those people.
Yeah, no question. All right, so yeah, we see Era 3 win. Era 4 and Era 2 have a close race for second, which I believe Era 4 just edged out.
Mm-hmm.
And then we see Era 1 from all the way back of not being able to get their boat in line, had no chance, even if they do come into an with a bit of an advantage in the final challenge of someone like Anissa probably being on a lot of seasons from pretty much every era of the show.
Yeah, Anissa, CT have been on every era, so I feel like they would definitely be people that would know
Yeah.
almost all of them. So, yeah, again, another disappointing loss for Era 1, but it is what it is, I guess.
Yep. So then we get back and we see something that we haven't got lately, and that's one of the first theme parties.
Yeah, the toga party. What did you think about that?
Brought back a bit more of what you would get out of Era 2, Era 3 into
Mm-hmm.
season 40, so that was interesting. You certainly start to see some alliances forming in the at this time. I'm starting to notice things that we've picked up online with like we know Michelle and Olivia are close, but maybe bringing in Theo into that, bringing in
Mm-hmm.
Ryan and Derek, Devin. We see a few relationships forming at this point: Olivia and Theo, Michelle and Devin, um, Brad and Emily.
And then we also, was this, correct me if I'm wrong, was this later on with the Tori versus Josh?
That's it. That's right after this, so
Yeah,
it's
okay,
fine to
sorry.
talk about now.
Yeah,
No, it's like the same scene essentially.
well, just going back to the toga party, I think it was Rivals 1 that had that, so I feel like it
Yeah,
was kind of a nostalgia thing for a lot of the
and then
players that.
even before that, season 5 had it or something. I don't know if you saw in the documentary that they put out maybe a year ago, a year and a half ago or
Mm-hmm.
something, but there's a really interesting clip there where the cast is just stuck because they can't film because there's a hurricane hitting the west coast of Mexico,
Oh yeah.
and they're having a toga party in the dark. And at one point, Durrell talks in the documentary about how he called the National Hurricane Center out of Miami in order to get information on how to stay safe. And he quickly realizes that the US government, rather than trying to keep the cast safe, is trying to get information out of the cast to keep Los Angeles safe for a few days later.
Yeah, I did watch that documentary, but yeah, that's funny that you mentioned that, and I like how it was also not just an Rivals 1 thing, but it was I haven't watched season 5, so
Yeah, I
I
haven't either. I
um
mean, I don't even think I can access anything before 19.
oh really?
Yeah.
Um anyways, what so just going into the toga party, we see everybody come out in their togas, and then we see Kara come out in a very Kara outfit, which I honestly love that. And I love how Kara is just authentically herself and unapologetically, and she's gonna do what she wants to do, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. She's great on the show.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see how this season goes for her as we it seems to be um coming up in the future episode that's probably the next episode to air that it's all kicking off again
Mm-hmm.
with a rivalry that goes back about 20 seasons at this point, but we'll see how that goes for her.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully well, but I'd never want to be on the opposite end of loyal, that's for sure.
Oh, 100%. But then we see the Tori and Josh argument because we had seen previously that Josh and Naya were hooking up. And then on this episode, we get Naya and Kyland hooking up. And then we see that Josh is I will say he was very respectful about it. He basically said like, you know what, she's her own person, she can do whatever she wants, but and I feel like he didn't want to admit that he was upset, and I think
Yeah,
Michelle really hit the nail on the head when she said that she doesn't necessarily think that Josh is that upset at Tori. He's just upset about the situation and is
exactly.
like displacing the blame on Tori.
Who just happened to be there at the time.
Yes. And I get it. He doesn't want people making fun of him, but it's also like when you're doing something right in front of everybody and you're living in a house with 40 people, I feel like it's bound to get talked about.
Yeah, you're completely right there. Though, what a great moment when you just have our queen of the show, Michelle,
Mhm.
trying to enjoy her night, have clearly had a great party with the wine out, and
Mhm.
just walks into the middle of all of this drama while she's eating her dinner.
Yeah, that was my favorite scene of that episode. It was just she was just unbothered and she just was like, I should not be here right now.
Yeah.
And I don't know, you could tell she was like she just didn't want to get in the middle of it, so she was kind of trying to like stay out of it, but also it was just funny that she just happened to be right there when that was going down.
And kind of to go be into the preview again, it looks like that's the first but not the last fight that Michelle accidentally walks into.
Yeah. Yeah. That's definitely going to be interesting.
All right.
But we had
Go ahead.
the deliberation
Yep.
next then.
And this is where this episode gets interesting because Era 3 is back to another moment that we see actually pretty often in Era 3 where they just can't make up their mind.
Yeah, and it really brought me because I don't think we touched on this earlier, but Tony, you just went into elimination. You just won the elimination. You could have easily told your team, you know what? I was just in. Somebody else has got to do it.
Yeah.
Like, and I don't know, it could have not worked. They could have still voted him in, but at the same time, it's like you were the only person there that had an argument of out of everybody, it should not be me, and we cannot be a team if it's everybody against me, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
So I don't know why he decided to nominate himself earlier, and I think it just goes back to was he really trying his best to be there or was he not?
I
But
honestly don't think he was. My take on Tony this season is that he he hasn't been on the challenge in quite a while.
mhm.
And to come back, I almost think that Tony, more so than wanting to win season 40, just wanted to use this as an opportunity to like walk away from the show, letting people know I'm a mature person who's not the same guy that had a girlfriend back home while hooking up with Camilla.
A pregnant girlfriend, but
Yeah. Good point.
yeah, and I mean, I don't know because I feel like anybody with eyes later on, we'll talk about the elimination, but anybody with eyes is going to say, "Why are you nominating yourself?" Second of all, what were you doing in that elimination?
Yeah.
And we saw
And
him on All
third,
Stars
why
4
is he
also.
doing that to nominate himself, knowing that that throws Avery's game into complete disarray?
Absolutely. And
When
I'm
she,
not
you
even
can tell, wants to win this season.
I'm not
No
even talking
question.
about I'm not even talking about the stalemate yet. I'm just saying why are you nominating yourself as a captain?
Yeah.
Like those two things already say red flags. And then we saw him on All Stars 4 and he was there very briefly, so it's like it I feel like once you see those things, you're going to be questioning yourself. And then I did see online, I think he was on Bananas' podcast and Zach's podcast, and I saw some clips of that. And Zach had texted him, like, did you throw it? And then he said, no, I'm just that dumb. And then with Bananas, he said that he absolutely denied it. And he was saying that it actually hurt him that people were saying he was throwing it. So I don't know. But yeah, during that deliberation, I feel like it should just be enough of a victory for Tony to say, you know what, we won. And he still needed to have like another input into that, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
it makes perfect, complete sense.
What do you think of that deliberation?
I really think pretty much what you just said is that they, this group, and specifically Tony, needed to find a way to be a united team, and instead they didn't get that. We'll see going forward, but I think in the looking ahead to the long term, if you have a team member that's indecisive like that and that you're questioning whether they really want to be there or not, probably is holding Era 3 back when you look at how that they have players like Torley, like Devin, like Corley, Avery that are very strong competitors in this game.
Yeah, and another thing is we see Tony going to bat for Era 4, saying he does not want to nominate Casey and Kyland. And he is willing to throw himself in instead of nominating them. But then if we go back to Final Reckoning, we see that when Zach nominated himself instead of voting him, Tony and Bananas in, Tony didn't say, "Hey, it's okay, man. Like, I'm not gonna let you do that," or whatever. So it's like, why
Yeah,
is he going to bat for people that he just met instead of someone like why does he want to protect Era 4 so badly? And I think it's not even about Era 4, and I think it's more about his ego and his
yeah,
pride of because any normal person would say, Avery, you were roommates with Derek. He is your number one. We cannot vote him in. I don't have
exactly.
a relationship with these people, and all you say to Kylan and Casey is, you know what? I didn't have a say in this. She will not vote in her former roommate in number one. I'm sorry.
Which is fair. And it's not even like you when you mentioned Final Reckoning, it's not even like you have the opportunity to get rid of Amanda in this because we've already done that.
Yeah, 100%. And it's like there it I don't know, I think he just wasn't making sense during
Yeah,
that. But we see the deliberation just kind of come to a close and we see Tony say, "I'll go into elimination," basically. And then
pretty much.
Avery and he's expecting Avery to say, "I'm not going in," but Avery says, "So will I."
Yeah. Which I mean, good for her if she's confident that she can win, because now Avery's already been into an elimination, and I guess we're now kind of getting into the elimination, but Avery goes in against Era 1 and manages to come back.
Yeah, and I think that was also a very bold move from both of them because Jody is arguably one of the best, if not the best female on Era 4 or Era 1. Like
Yeah,
I have
I
seen
would agree.
people because on the duel too, Jody won like every single daily.
Yeah,
Jody, and we've seen her on All Stars, we've seen her on World Championships. Jody is a very fit woman. So I feel like um I was kind of when I was watching this, I was like, I don't know if this is the best idea for Avery because if it's something like a pole wrestle, I feel like I Avery would win, you know?
yeah.
And Darrell, we know, is a four-time champ and also someone that has a lot of friends in every era, basically. So I don't know, it was kind of a very bold move to go against those two specifically in era 4.
Completely agree. At least from the Tony versus Duel perspective, like we said, we're not quite sure if Tony even wanted to be there. So the fact that he went home and that Duel is still in the game doesn't surprise me at all.
Mm-hmm.
um,
Absolutely.
yeah, from Jody and Avery, it really depends on what challenge they get. They're both great competitors.
Mm-hmm.
And in this case, Avery came out on top. I think once again, kind of proving what I kind of saw at least pre-game this game going, and that's that yes, I know a lot of people online are saying Era One is the absolute best team there is. I don't see it that way. I think that in the modern game, having experience playing the challenge as it currently is, as opposed to how it once was, will
Mm-hmm.
be invaluable for both Era 3 and Era 4.
Yeah, and I definitely
But we'll
think
see how it plays out.
in a season like this, maybe being an era 1 player has some advantages because they're trying to bring back some of the old school stuff, but at the same time, it is a later on season and it's never going to be the same as one of the earlier seasons was. And we definitely see that again with the eliminations. And I actually like this elimination because it was still something physical because obviously picking up a block and running back and forth with it is not something that is easy to do by any
Yeah,
means. But at the same time, it was an equalizer because it required a lot of like brain power and being able to know what to do.
exactly. No, I really
Uh,
liked that as well.
and we see that for the men, at least, Darrell said in his confessional that he is just gonna listen to the crowd. He's like, tell me what to do. And that's again just
Which is a good strategy when Durrell is Durrell. He's one of the nicest guys in this game that nobody can say
absolutely.
anything bad about. And Tony has proven to be, at this point, a little untrustworthy to his own team. Well, more than a little. And therefore is probably not going to have that support when it comes to getting help from the rest of the players.
Yeah, and like you said, Darrell is just so likable by everybody, and he not only in his own era, but I feel like in every because Darrell is also somebody that we've seen in every era,
Yeah,
but from people in other eras, they also want to help Darrell probably instead of Tony too.
exactly.
So I
I mean, if I were
was
Tori and Devin, I'd be wanting to help Durrell over Tony, and I'm in
yeah.
Tony's era.
Well, maybe not because maybe you want him back so you can keep sending him.
That's a good point.
But yeah, we did see that or Darrell and Tony, but I don't know why Tony didn't just look over to what Darrell was doing because when we see the end of that elimination, it was just nowhere near close. And
Yeah,
that's like another reason that makes me believe that Tony was not there to compete.
no.
Tony time was not back.
When we get to next episode, we'll certainly have a much more competitive men's elimination to talk about.
Yes, for sure. But what did you think of the men's, or do you have any more thoughts, or just the
I think we
females?
really covered it. Um, that pretty much wraps up episode 3, unless you have anything else you want to add.
So I do want to
Sure.
ask, so we saw obviously Avery won, and we
Yep.
saw that Darrell won. And TJ tells us that he's going to be introducing something as the targets, aka the team captains.
Yep.
So we see from era one, it was Derek and Anissa.
Yep.
Era two, it was Laurel and Bananas.
Right.
Three, do you remember? Oh,
Um.
three, Jordan
Yeah.
volunteered, didn't he?
Yeah.
Jordan
Jordan
volunteered,
volunteered.
and who was the female that we saw?
John A. I think. I haven't seen it in a while, so
Yeah, I haven't seen. Okay,
I'd have to look it up.
whatever. And then from era four, it was Kyland and Casey,
Yeah.
right? Wait, yeah, it was. Okay. Wait, no, it was Jenny and Horacio.
Yeah. Jenny and
Yeah.
Horacio.
Yeah.
We're thinking of 2 different episodes,
Yeah.
but that's okay.
Um, if you
Once we
were,
get on track with the
it'll make more
with the
sense.
show, it'll make more sense to us talking about what we just watched.
Yeah. If you were Darrell and Avery, who are the people that you would pick from each era? We can start with era one.
Um, with Arrow One, I think they did a pretty good job. At some point, you have to balance like with them pick with someone like Duell picking with his own era,
Mm-hmm.
and you're gonna want your era to be players that can compete. Should you go into the next elimination? Where it gets interesting is when it comes down to the other eras, because you have to kind of decide: do you want an easier competition?
Mm-hmm.
In which case you could, well, I mean, nobody's an easy competition in this game, at
Mm-hmm.
least at this point. But do you want somebody that's seen as easier, like let's say John A, who's only won All Stars, or do you want the opportunity to say get someone like Jenny or Laurel out of this game.
See, I think if I was Avery, I would look at it more as picking somebody who's a bigger target because I'm I want to bet on the fact that I'm going to win the next daily and I'm not going to have to go because I mean if you just went into elimination, you're not going back in, which
True.
I really like this twist because of that.
Yeah.
So,
At least we hope.
yeah, well, for now at
For now.
least. Um, but I feel like I would want to take a shot at like I would also think Laurel and Bananas are good targets to have.
Yeah.
Um, and then for Era 3, Jordan volunteered, and then we also had John A. So I think for her picking that, because Darrell didn't have to, correct me if I'm wrong, the men pick the females and the
That's
females
right.
pick the men. So I think I would want to bet on the fact that since I'm not going to be the next elimination, I want to try to take a big shot. So I would try to select like the biggest names. So I would select an Horacio and a Jenny. And
Yeah.
I would also select a Laurel and Bananas, if that makes sense. Or
Yeah.
what do you think?
No, I think that makes perfect sense. At some point, because if you continue to do that, at some point you're gonna get a daily that another era wins, and you're just gonna get two of these big names going head to head,
Mm-hmm.
and that ensures that one of them will eventually go home.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. But is there anything else that you have from this episode?
Not from this one.
All right. Should we wrap it up for this one?
Yep, let's wrap it up and thank you all. This has been episode 3 for the New Generation Challenge podcast. And we will be back in a few days with episode 4. And then after the episode airs on, I guess, the 18th with episode 5.
Yeah, thank you so much for listening.
Night.